In today's episode of the Pathmonk Presents podcast, I have a very interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Jason Hunt, who is the co-founder, but also, having that marketing hat, that CMO hat of Merged Media. Merged Media is a full-service digital marketing agency that focuses on, fully fledged marketing campaigns, from SEO to website development, social media, you have it. And I'm glad today to discuss with Jason, his perspective on marketing and also how he's thinking about the growth of the company. So welcome to the show.
Awesome, Lucas. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Very cool, Jason. So maybe, I hope I didn't butcher the introduction there. So maybe give us, your perspective on, what is Merged all about.
Yeah, sure. If you don't mind, I'll go back just a little bit to back to 2015 when I started a social media agency called Fresh Crowd Inc. And Fresh Crowd social media, and back in 2015, pushing social media to new clients was a little different than it is today. Back in 2015, when you talk to a small business owner, social media advertising was sort of cutting edge. So it was easy to have a conversation at the time. Nowadays, if I approach a small business, I'm the 38th person that's called in a given day. So it's become quite a saturated market, but definitely it's become a much needed market for any small business or medium-sized business out there to take advantage of. So fast forward a bit, I grew that company very fast, doing every part of the business from the content creation to the selling, to the business management, and then grew it to 100 clients in the first year, built up an entire team around me, and then ended up merging that company with a leading SEO company back in 2019. And I say leading because when you Google SEO companies in Canada, Casio is near the top. And so I decided to merge my company with Casio to form Merged Media. Last year, we acquired a web design company. So now we can take care of all angles of digital marketing for our clients. So rather than the jack of all trades, master of none agency, we can actually take all in-house and we collaborate around the boardroom table, much like digital marketing should be done.
Very cool. I mean, I like it how you were saying it. A simple Google search reveals the best SEO companies by nature. Very
Had to
good.
do it, right? That's how you know a good SEO company, right? Just Google SEO companies in your area.
Very cool. So, who would you say are your typical clients? It sounded a little bit like local companies, but what's a typical client for Merged?
Yeah. So when I started the business back in 2015, I did not niche. I never chose a niche to go down. So we actually have served pretty much every single business under the sun, from restaurants to skincare to even a blind fisherman was a client at one point. So we never really focused on one area, but we do work with the likes of some pretty big brands like Broil King Barbecues. We also work with, we've done some work with Firehouse Subs, McDonald's. So we've done a lot of work with a ton of different types of businesses. But really our focus right now this year has been a lot of lead generation. So this year we actually partnered with a real estate magazine here in Canada, one of the biggest ones. And we're doing a lot of SEO and social media for that magazine to bring exposure to it. So realtors, but 2020 was a crazy year, Lucas. We had a lot of clients in dental and restaurants and travel that essentially shut down their marketing budgets and kind of forced us, but it's actually quite fortunate to be in digital marketing to have the ability to pivot. So now we're working with a lot of landscape companies, home renovation companies, e-commerce companies and realtors. These are industries that are actually thriving right now. So that's kind of our area of focus.
Very cool. Very cool. Yes, I would love to talk a little bit about, I love this cobblers and shoes example, right? I always love to ask the marketing heads of these agencies, like, the customer journey that somebody's going through in order to get started with Merge. Like, what is the channels that you guys leverage?
Yeah. So when somebody gets started, or how somebody comes in contact with Merged, okay. I love that question. So for us, we do a lot of, we spend about $100 to $200 a day just trying to generate leads for ourselves. We split half of that budget towards lead generation and half of that budget towards brand awareness. This is so important in this industry to do brand awareness and not just put all of your eggs in the cold targeting lead generation basket, because, we do a podcast, the Merged Marketing Podcast, which, that we don't care about the subs. It's not about the subs, as you probably know, for this podcast, it's not, the subs is great, but it's really about bringing people into your ecosystem through the top of the funnel, having somebody watch even 25% of a podcast episode. They're now going into a retargeting audience, being served a certain series of ads through our Facebook retargeting. So it's really leveraging these type of platforms to drive the top of funnel awareness, but understanding we're not going to get ROI overnight from the time we put into our podcast. Somebody might have seen our podcast 12 months ago and they become a client 12 months later. And we understand and have the patience to understand that.
Very cool. What I like to ask is, especially since you brought up, lead generation and brand awareness, different campaigns, your own website, like, how do you think about the page? Like, what role does it play for you? And, what job do you sort of attribute to the website?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for us, our website is in development right now. And this is actually a challenge with a lot of digital marketing agencies, is they spend so much time on their clients, they don't dedicate enough time to themselves. So, our website's right now, it serves a purpose of a place where we can send traffic to for our podcast, get listeners in there listening to our podcast. But, we do it in a way that the services are there, but they're kind of like a secondary to getting listeners to our podcast. Those certain people that are in our hot audience, we're going to drive them to certain landing pages off of our website. But the focal point for a lot of it, especially a cold audience, is, hey, go listen to a couple episodes of our podcast, spend some time on our website, because if you're spending a lot of time on our website, you're going to be put into a certain retargeting audience through our Facebook ads. You're going to enter a different category within our Facebook ads, like the MOFU, MIFU, or BOFU, whatever you want to call it.
So. Very good. Awesome. Where do you see the website doing? I mean, we're talking a lot about websites in the Pathmonk Presents podcast. That's why I'm bringing that up. Like, where do you see the website evolving to? Like, is there a different role that you have in mind? Is there maybe room for improvement that you see?
It's a great question, because, I did a little research into what you guys do, and I think it's very interesting, seeing the actions and activity that people are actually taking on a website. Conversion rate optimization is so important. I mean, for the websites that we develop for our clients, we have an entire department that focuses on that CRO, conversion rate optimization. But, looking at those behaviors that people are taking on a site that we develop. For example, we always have a contact form above the fold. Every website needs to have a contact form above the fold. I mean, the internet landscape is so noisy now. People don't have time to consume all that information on a website. So they just want to get the answer or the solution to their problem as quick as possible. And I think that's something that a lot of people, when they develop that website, are kind of avoiding or neglecting, is the fact that people don't want to spend a lot of time there.
Makes a whole lot of sense. I would love to switch gears a little bit, and, pick your brain a little bit about, marketing in general, for that matter. So I would be curious, what do you see as the biggest challenge in marketing? Because, you see a lot of it when it comes to innovation. Like, what is actually the challenge to bringing in innovation into the discipline?
Yeah, I think the big challenge is, people are very fixated on their competition, because everything is transparent now. You can go on to Facebook and see what your competition is running and what kind of ads they're running, without it really a focus on looking at themselves and focusing on their own community. We were on Clubhouse today for probably about 5 hours talking about influencer marketing. It's funny how that platform just consumes your time, but we were talking a lot about influencer marketing, and the key thing is that, it's not about having 10,000 followers or all these people following your page. It's about the quality of the people that are following you. I'd much rather have 1,000 followers that are engaged than 10,000 that are not engaged, right? So I think the big thing that a lot of people are avoiding now are taking advantages of their community and understanding what your community wants from you in terms from a content marketing perspective. I think it's really understanding that, and that can be easily done in the form of, surveys, direct DMs to people within your audience. Ask them the question, what do they like? What value do they like to see out of your content? And I think that'll give you a lot of insight into what type of content and strategies you need to be deploying.
Interesting. What would you see, though, as the biggest challenge when it comes to return on investment for the marketing discipline?
Oh, return on investment. I think people not spending enough time looking into the analytics of it, and there's simple things too, like making sure you have proper tracking on your website is key, right? A lot of people avoid that. It's funny. That's the very first thing I look at before I talk to a client is, hey, do you have a Facebook pixel on your website? Because if you don't have a Facebook pixel on your website, then you're eliminating any opportunity to retarget somebody with a Facebook or Instagram ad, right? Like it's such a simple thing to do. Even if you're not going to run Facebook ads tomorrow, having that pixel installed in your site gives you the opportunity to target them 6 months down the road. So it's little things like that. And people, not being patient. Patience is the key, right? Because the people that aren't patient or just want a result immediately, well, I mean, those people typically don't really spend too much time looking at analytics or the behaviors of people, because that does take time to understand the analytics and for people to come around. And increasing that ad frequency, which is how many times somebody sees one of your ads or visits your website. Like this is important data that does not happen overnight.
Makes sense. You touched a little bit on conversion rate optimization actually at the beginning of the conversation. Where do you see though the biggest challenge when it comes to CRO?
Biggest challenge with CRO is probably, a lot of lack of transparency with the thought process and behaviors of what people are thinking or feeling when they visit your website. There seems to be a kind of a lack there of people just, you can get the concrete numbers. You can look at your analytics and see where traffic's coming from. You can look at Ahrefs, whatever you want to call it, and see what types of, types of traffic is being sent to your site and from where. But the actual behaviors of people on your website is a little bit tricky to understand. Sure, you can see clicks, but the actual behaviors and thought processes is something you really don't understand.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to make it hard now. If you could only pick one of the things to focus on, to execute in marketing, what would it be? Would it be to focus on the roadmap, to, carve out the next growth initiative, to nail down messaging, or to deep dive into reporting?
Yeah, see, I'm putting on my CMO hat here for a second, and I talk a lot about this. The customer journey is so important, right? The journey as to how they become that customer. The way I like to look at it is, when you go to a bar and you see a girl at the bar, she looks nice and you happen to be single and you want to approach her, do you approach her aggressively or tell some lame pickup line and try to get her to take that next step to a date? Or do you go up to her and ask her what she's drinking and engage with her, get to know her first before taking that next leap to potentially a date? I think a lot of marketers and people try to take that quick pickup approach when really you need to approach it like that girl, male or female, at the bar. You need to understand that's the same way the customer is coming into your journey. So if that first ad that customer sees, or that website maybe is a little too aggressive in the ask, you might turn somebody off. And once you turn somebody off from that first ad, they're never going to come back to you. So it's so important, and people really avoid how powerful that first immediate connection is with your target audience.
Let's switch gears a little bit, because I'm also very curious, because you've been you're running the podcast yourself. What's the type of content that you actually consume, right? Because there's so much marketing content out there, and you only have limited time. How do you choose what you actually consume?
Yeah, so you're right, and it's funny because sometimes you do need to get away from the grind, right? Because I do consume a lot of digital marketing podcasts as a product. Probably a lot of your listeners do as well, who are listening to this right now. But it is important to kind of get out of it for a bit. This is how you get burnt out, right? When it's constantly 24/7 thinking about, digital marketing. So I do like to digress. I like to focus a lot on health as well. So, I'm reading a book right now called Superhuman by Dave Asprey. Great read, great book. And it talks just about, his goal is to live until 180. So the premise of the book is just to learn these things that he does in his life to live a healthy lifestyle. And health, I think, is something that does get neglected a lot, especially at least for myself, being an entrepreneur, running a digital marketing agency, living, breathing, eating digital marketing all the time. It really gets put on the back burner. So it's so important to remember to put health on this pedestal that cannot be forgotten, because at the end of the day, if you can prioritize health and you got your health, wealth, and happiness are all firing off on all cylinders, you're going to enjoy life a lot better, and you're going to come off to people as much more approachable and friendly. And it's just so important, and I think a lot of people neglect it.
Very good. I would love to jump into rapid fire questions. Although you already put one question away, so let's see. Okay, let's do it. So, what's the last book that you read? That last one, not the current one.
The last one that I read was The One Thing. Great book.
What's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Conversion rate optimization.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you would want to have fixed for your company today?
Ooh, no boundaries. Ooh. The ability to travel and hit every single trade show in the world. Unfortunately, we're not in good times to be able to do that, but I'd love to just eliminate all the stuff that's happening in the world right now and open up traveling again so we can go to trade shows and conferences. I so miss it.
Very cool. And you're going to be super hopping in between them. That's pretty awesome. What's
it.
the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
Ooh, that's a good question. Last thing that kept me awake at night. Ooh, I would say that would have to do with, the vision and mission of the company. This is something, I know it's a rapid fire, but if I can elaborate for a second, since we merged this company, we haven't had the opportunity to get away. There's a book called Traction, great book. And I've did this at other companies where you actually go away and do a retreat and get away from your 9-to-5 setting and with those people who are managers in the company to really solidify that mission and vision. But it's something, something for us here at Merged and probably for a lot of digital agencies out there, you're just focused on growth, right? And growth, and that's it. But growth where? What's that light at the end of the tunnel? So that it's so important to understand the purpose of the why as to why you're doing it and what that light is at the end of the tunnel. And this is something that is a focal point for us in 2021.
Super interesting. I want to bring you back now, right? So you mentioned you started an agency before. You've been through, that period of build up. If we zoom back to your very first day of starting your first agency, right? What's the one advice that you would give yourself?
Breathe. You got to breathe. I'll tell you right now. For myself, when I was doing everything, I had to run home from the hospital for the birth of my second child because I had to put out content because, my business promised daily content for social media and I was the only person running everything. So if I didn't get home to push out that content, I would be letting down my client. So, if I were to go back, it's definitely taking a breath, but understanding the value and what you're worth. You know what I mean? Don't sacrifice yourself or your well-being to push that company. Because at the end of the day, you're only going to do harm to yourself. And you really, I think that's one of the big things. And also delegate when it's time to delegate. Too many times you try to wear all the hats. That was one of the biggest moves that I made in my business was hiring a content manager to take all that content off my plate so I can focus on selling and driving the business. And, sometimes it's really tough, especially for entrepreneurs and business owners to let go of that stuff that they're doing because you don't think somebody else can do it better. They can do it better. And I am not the best content manager in my business. I have somebody that's 10 times better than me at it.
I think it's great that you shared that message with the people listening, because I think, it can be very, very occupying building up those companies. So really appreciate you sharing those insights. So thanks a lot, Jason, for being part of the Pathmonk podcast today. I want to give you the very last word, right? If, they would be forgetting everything that we discussed today about Merged, what is the one thing that they should remember?
Oh, the one thing they should remember is focus on the top of funnel. Focus, don't sell too soon. Be patient with it. People will come to you when they were good and ready. And stop LinkedIn spamming people. And you know who you are out there. Don't do it. Don't do it. And when you get a chance, tune in to the Merged Marketing Podcast. That's my podcast that I run. Our audience are entrepreneurs, business owners, and marketing people. And we've had some great guests on. We've had John Lee Dumas, Dennis Yu, and last week we had Edward Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg's dad was on the podcast. So go on over to merged.ca/podcast. Check it out.
Thanks for being part of Pathmonk Presents today.
Awesome. Thank you, Lucas, for having me. This was fun.